Well folks, here we are, the final build already. The week has gone quickly as it already does in Special Projects Pack number 7, and this one of course is first and foremost about fun, but it actually surprised me because of just how quick this actually is. It's a car which I wrongly named in the trailer. I called it a Hilux because I always get mixed up between Hilux and the... In fact, I'm doing it right now. What's this one called again? A Hiace. That's the one. I always forget it because it's not a vehicle that I talk about that much. But this is a fictional, of course, Dakar Rally Raid style build. Rally Raid has had some inclusion in Gran Turismo, mostly from Mitsubishi, of course. And we've had some weird rally cars like the Tajima E-Runner. But mostly we tend to have the familiar faces of Pikes Peak and WRC, especially stuff like the Escudo, etc. So this one is something a bit different. But, as it turns out, I would actually say this thing's better on the dirt than it is on the road. In fact, it's deceptively quick. Now, of course, I will have put a link on screen to grab this particular livery. I like what the player did. And to me, it kind of has a Dakar kind of look, even though I don't think that's what they intended it for. There are plenty of great-looking racing liveries, though, so that's all down to you. If you do go for this player's particular one, though, which is linked in the description, I would recommend making a couple of changes, and they're just personal preference things. You will need the wide body, incidentally, to fit their livery. What I've done is actually reverted some of the bodywork to the stock stuff, because I wanted it to have, you know, the extra mud flaps and the extra lights, whereas they'd removed it. And another thing that I did was removing the ramp from the back end, because obviously it's not technically an ambulance in this form, we're using it just as a rally truck. So as far as the actual build, we're basically fitting everything in a general sense, but there are a couple of specifics which I've opted for, like having the weight capped off to 2 tons, and obviously you can see it's not quite running as much power as you might expect. So we've got stage 1 weight. Of course, you've got whatever tyres you want to go for. I'm running dirt tyres naturally, as you'll see in a second. We've got the bored-out engine, high-lift cams, high-compression pistons, of course, stage 2 weight, the power restrictor, the ballast, and naturally the dirt tyres, as I said. We've got the racing crank, the fully customised computer, the low RPM turbo. I actually have all 3 purchased, as I'm sure many of us do, but I've gone for the low RPM because, of course, A, it's a rally car, so it makes more sense, and you will spend a lot of time in first and second gear. So you really need to have that instant low-end torque, and it gives you plenty of that. As far as the diff, of course, it is a limited slip. You want your stage 3 weight. I haven't bothered with the rigidity on this one, so I'll leave that up to you if you want to do it or not. We've got the polished ports, the balanced tuning, the stroked out engine, race intercooler, filter, silencer, pads, manifold, and of course discs. Like I've said before, doesn't matter which discs you go for, drilled, vented, or I should say drilled, slotted, which I guess is vented anyway, or the carbon ceramics. We've got the race clutch and flywheel. Of course, you want the torque vectoring center diff to be able to split it between front and rear. The fully customised suspension, transmission. I know some people prefer to go with the full manual transmission, so again, that's up to you. We've got racing hards, but that's just a carryover from a previous build, so you don't necessarily need that. As far as the extreme stuff, well, it's a rally build from me, so of course it has the steering angle adapter and the hydraulic handbrake, which definitely help on a car that's as big and as heavy as this. The high lift cams S, titanium connecting rods and pistons, and just for the sake of it, the carbon prop shaft. So like I said, pretty much fit everything. The only thing notable that I haven't fitted is pretty much NOS. Apart from that, it's got most everything else. One of the biggest differences you'll see on this vehicle is what turbo you use. And with something that's this big and this heavy, and I saw comments as much when I was reviewing it, it makes such a massive difference. Because the high range turbo, which is what I first used, of course it takes so long to get there. Mid-range tends to be very good for rallying, but again, you don't spend that much time in the mid-revs with a vehicle like this, so that low range, it gives you that punch out of corners, and I would recommend, as I often do with my rally builds, and for those of you who use manual all the time, this is a no-brainer because you always do, but for those like me who prefer auto generally, I do like to use manual mostly on rally builds, because the game just doesn't change enough, especially not changing down, and with a vehicle like this, you have to have that gear control, because you will need to kick it down into second, and sometimes even first, to get the best out of it. The automatic makes it way too sluggish. So as far as the actual tuning, as you can see, just over 500 points. You don't have to make it 2 tons, which is exactly 2,000 kilos, but I just like the way it looked. I think it has kind of a symmetry to it, combined with the 470 horsepower or just under. It kind of looks believable for a Dakar kind of spec. So if you want to just drop the weight that I've added, no issue at all. Would technically probably make it even quicker if you wanted to. As far as the suspension though, we've increased the ride height all the way to give it that proper look. We've got 3 on the anti-roll. The compression on the dampers is as low as it can go, likewise with the expansion. I know that this kind of stuff, again with the lowest possible spring frequency, is not accurate to real life. They would have stiffer settings than that, but you want it to look and feel the part. Of course, as I said, it's about being fun as well as fast, and with a vehicle like this with a huge amount of ground clearance, having that kind of springy suspension actually helps you with your flow from corner to corner anyway, rather than being super rigid. We've got 1.5 degrees of camber on the front. I've opted for none on the back at all, so you can kind of swing around that back end a bit more. For the toe, we've got toe in 10, and then all the way out on the back. So no camber, but a massive amount of toe, and of course that really encourages the back end to step loose. I haven't tried this incidentally on the tarmac, but it might not be that pleasant to use because of having that much toe. As far as the diff, I've got triple 10 on the front and then 10, 30 and 30 on the rear with, unsurprisingly for me, a 50-50 split. It may seem natural to go for more of a 30-70 to get the back end out. That is technically true, but the problem I find with that is when you get to a vehicle that's this big and this heavy and this sluggish in terms of power response, you need all the help you can get in terms of getting that front end going. So I've combined having a rear tendency on the diff and on the suspension, but then actually still give the front end plenty of torque. Personally, for me, I find that that's a good combination, so give it a try, and if you don't like it, you can always change it. I've gone for 180 on the auto setting, which is pretty close ratio for something with 470 horsepower. And even with that ratio, you will find yourself in the lower gears most of the time anyway. As far as the weight, I've added just a little bit, 27 kilos, like I said. I've put that all the way to the front. Doesn't make too much of a difference, but again, I did that to make the back end even more loose, with less weight over it. The power restrictor and the ECU are untouched. Downforce doesn't apply. As I said, low RPM turbo is fitted. Pity we don't have the anti-lag. That's kind of a weird omission, and it would have really helped. And then the other stuff you can see that we have fitted here. Basically, racing all down the board. So all that remains, of course, for this final build is to jump out on the dirt and show you what it can do in practice. Now, I already alluded to the fact that I would strongly recommend, it's almost essential to be honest, using the manual gearbox. Even for me, who prefers autos whenever possible because I'm lazy and that's just my preference, it is so much better to use this one with the manual box. And I know that people say, well, everything's better with the manual box. I don't disagree. I just can't be bothered gaining those few extra seconds. With the manual, I would rather just enjoy the cornering and the acceleration, but on a dirt track, you really don't have the option, especially with something as unique as this. That being said, with this build, with this car, with this spec, this thing is a lot of fun to drive, and it is no coincidence that I've bookended Special Projects number 7 with 2 Toyota Rally builds, both fresh debuts in the form of the Corolla and this one, and they are both extremely fun. In fact, overall, these might be the 2 most fun builds out of all 10. So if you do decide to use this one, of course, check out the Corolla as well. That one is a hell of a lot quicker, but also delivers a lot of fun as well. 2 very different approaches to rallying. And this one, again, although it's not a replica of Gran Turismo's past, kind of harkens back, at least for me, to those times when we used to have like the Mitsubishi Rally Raid trucks and stuff like that. And even in other games like the Colin McRae series, where there was like a secret Ford Transit Rally van. I love that kind of thing, these Rally Raid support vehicles. You don't see them in games as often, so it's fun to build them when we can. So I hope you've enjoyed this week of Special Projects Pack number 7. Of course, we'll be revisiting the concept again with Pack number 8, most likely next month. And of course, we'll wait to see whatever Polyphony hopefully gives us at the end of the month officially in their update. For now though, I hope you've enjoyed these 10. If you haven't checked out the others, of course I would recommend doing so, and show all of the designers and creators some love from me. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.